Brought to you by businessblueprint.com.au.
That's there. To actually get it out to the media, there's a couple of different ways. I actually still like fax. A lot of people, are saying do the email and things like that. Like when I sort of do this sort of stuff semi-regularly, I've always found that faxes still get a better conversion rate because no one uses the fax anymore. Newsrooms still have them. The phone number for the newsroom is still on the website. So if you've got some sort of, 24, 25-year-old journalist who's just started out at, the News or The Age or something like that, and they hear this really weird sound in the corner, they'll walk over to it to find out what the hell that is, and they'll pick the fax up. So actually, it's about not being where the noise is. Just like marketing with sales, you want to get to them without all the noise. And if everybody these days is just hammering their inbox with emails, you're going to get lost in the noise. So a fax, I've found, actually gets out of that noise, like every marketing. No matter what you're doing in your business, all the press release is, again, is a sales letter to your target audience here, which is a journalist. So just like direct mail, what are you going to do to actually stand out? So that's the fax. So that's the press release style. To get it in the hands, look, there's plenty of different ways again. If you've got a bit of a budget, AAP MediaNet is a company in Australia I would recommend using. They're one of the largest press release distribution companies, AAP MediaNet. Again, they are a bit more expensive, but again, the reason I use those guys is to, again, reinforce you know what you're doing. Because they will actually take more attention, generally, to the news wires and the stuff that AAP give out, because they know that those people are playing the game. There's something serious there. They're not just trying to get some cheap story in my inbox because, like everybody else, is just hammering email because it's free these days. Someone's going to use MediaNet. It just, again, implies there's a serious story because you're willing to invest some money to use an actual reputable company to get it out. Again, you can always go direct, grab the fax machine number off the website or the magazine's website, wherever it might be, and send it out that way. So that's the press release side of stuff. So that's, in 4 or 5 minutes, how to do publicity through press releases. So,
Sorry, is there a special time or special day in the week or whatever?
Look, I don't know a direct answer to that question. I'd say you're best off in the afternoon, and I have no stats to back that up. The reason being is because most people are on deadlines till about 3 o'clock in most media, generally. So, if you're trying to catch them in the morning, they're too busy scrambling, getting the stories they already had on their plate to do. I've always found personally, and again, I don't have any stats on this, that seeing in the afternoon, they're fresh, they've hit their deadline, they're now sort of thinking about what are they going to do next. So if you can sort of hit them then, it's easier. Get out of the noise as well. So that's the press release side of things. Now, having said that, it's not the most effective, whoops. It's not the most effective way to get exposure these days in the media. So have a crack at it, but leave that as your last resort from what I'm going to talk about today. All right, so another way is actually getting the media to come to you. This is really cool, because why go out and chase that down when the media can come to you? Has anybody heard of the service SourceBottle? Yeah. How many of us actually subscribe to SourceBottle? Awesome, cool. So I think that is not needing a lot of introduction. There's also a one called Help a Reporter Out, which is the biggest one in the US, and it's really easy to get exposure through these services. What they are, for those who aren't aware, are services. It's like a platform that journalists from across the globe can go to and actually put in requests for experts and for quotes. So they might have already found an idea for an article. They've been pitched an article by somebody else and want a second opinion. Their editor has said, I want you to write an article about this. And they say they're lazy. This is the problem with journalists these days. They've got deadlines. They've got a whole lot of stuff to get done. They don't want to do proper journalism anymore, unfortunately. And I'll talk about why in a moment. But the journalists are on deadlines, need to get stuff out quickly. So what they're doing these days is rather than actually doing any due diligence themselves, doing proper investigative reporting, all they're doing is just going, okay, what's the easiest way I can get an opinion on this? Well, I'm just going to go to Harrow, SourceBottle, put a request out. I'll get emails in my inbox in half an hour. Bang, call someone up. There's my quote, done, article's written. Doing very, very little due diligence. There's a guy by the name of Ryan Holiday, who I've had the privilege of knowing and spoken to a couple of times, who's actually got a book that's actually being released today. He's a US guy through Penguin. The rumour is he's got a $500,000 at book advance. So this guy knows what he's talking about. He's the strategist behind Robert Greene, Tucker Max, Tim Ferriss, some of you may know. So he's got a book coming out today, and I had the privilege of reading that recently. And He's got some amazing stories about media manipulation. And if you want to check it out without buying the book, check out Tim Ferriss's blog. Ryan wrote a guest post on there yesterday, which is really, really cool. And I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that Ryan shared on the blog yesterday at 4hourworkweek.com. But what Ryan did to sort of prove this point and how powerful Harrow and how powerful things like SourceBottle are is what he's done recently prior to the book coming out to sort of, help tell the story of the book, is he actually went to these services and just faked his expert knowledge. And he got featured in the New York Times as somebody who was a avid vinyl record collector. And because one of the journalists in the New York Times had a requirement to write an article about the record industry and how the vinyl records are changing. So they, being lazy journalists or a busy journalist, whichever way you want to look at it, went out to Harrow and said, I need an expert on vinyl records, someone who's got collections, can they respond? So Ryan responded, yeah, gave him a quote, yeah, I found the vinyl's really cool. I really hear the key changes on the guitar when I listen to my vinyl, much prefer it, was basically his quote. New York Times printed that without doing any due diligence. So he was featured in the New York Times saying he's an avid vinyl record collector and had no experience, didn't even own a record player. He was featured on CNBC as someone who's a chronic asthma sufferer. He was featured in another magazine as something I think it was to do with travel. So just to prove the point that you don't have to even have credibility to get exposure, he went out and did this to sort of sell the book and sort of get a story behind it. So these things are really powerful. If you can obviously back up your response to these services like SourceBottle and Harrow with credibility, you should easily get picked up. Now, this is one of the things, if you've got a virtual assistant, an outsourcer, this is something that they should be doing for you, not you, because it's mechanical. This is sort of the core versus mechanical stuff I touched on last time in the last presentation, is that what you should be doing is things that are core to your business that only you can do. Identifying which story opportunities come through on Harrow or SourceBottle that are in your area of expertise is something your outsourcer should be doing for you. So they should be the person who subscribes to these services. They should be reading the emails when they come through 3 or 4 times a day. And they should be only forwarding to you the 2 or 3 things that are actually relevant to you and your expertise. There's no point you dealing with that email. There's no value in you doing that because that's mechanical. There's value in you actually responding because only you can give the good comment, you can give the valuable information back to the Harrow or SourceBottle reporter. But there's no point you sitting by your inbox waiting for that 3 o'clock email from SourceBottle. Let your outsourcers do that and then just hit you on Skype or on email when something is actually relevant and you can reply to. So that's a quick tip in implementing that sort of system.
Brought to you by businessblueprint.com.au.